Good evening, everyone. We are off to a very late start. We are sorry about that. The internet has its time when it acts up as everything. So here we go again. Welcome to Leading with Light. Let me hope that everyone is hearing me and that we are open today for a great discussion. Today we will look at the question that most leaders avoid. We're looking at our topic today. What happens when you have delegated? What if you stop carrying everything? What do you become? So last week we looked at the leaders who carry everything. And today we want to look at those who are actually delegating. And we want to discuss what you become. For those who don't know me, I'm Dr. Marcia Thomas. I am a faith-based leadership consultant and coach, and I help female leaders align their purpose with their calling. I help them to move from an owner to a steward and to stop praying survival prayers as they move from exhaustion to peace. And so today, I want to welcome all those who are joining on LinkedIn, on YouTube. It's a delight to always have you every single week. Thank you for taking the time. So I want to we start at the question most leaders avoid. What is the question that most leaders avoid? And why do they avoid the question? So we move along to a very piercing question for the leaders. The question I want you to ask yourself, if you're a leader, an exceptional leader, a steward, who was once in the ownership trap, if you are presently in the ownership trap and you want to become a steward, the question I want you to ask yourself, and if you're not, and you're just a leader, and you just want to evaluate your state, your system, yourself, I want you to ask yourself, who am I if I'm not carrying everything? So if you're not a leader, if you're not in the ownership trap, if you don't believe, and the ownership trap for those who are not here, we looked last week at the fact that you're not overwhelmed, you're over-responsible. And over-responsible means that you're in the ownership trap. And the ownership trap means that you feel that you are carrying everything, you have a problem delegating, you have a problem trusting people with responsibility, you feel that it cannot be done right if you do not do it yourself, and you have an issue with micromanagement. So the question I want you to ask yourself, for those who benefited last week and for those who decided that you would want to put some thing in place, who have actually started putting things in place, and you're beginning to feel a little destitute, this is for you. Who am I is a question you're asking if I'm not carrying everything. As I said, welcome to all those who have joined. Thank you, Dr. Leslie, for joining. I see you, Frank. I see you, Simone. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you, Angela. I see you also. And I welcome all the other leaders. And I ask that you share the information so persons can join and they can benefit. The key points I want to talk about today is if you've been carrying everything, and now you're starting to let go, and the deeper question that emerges is, who am I? If I'm not carrying everything, then this session is for you. I want to talk to a leader who finally delegates, takes that bold step. But now you're feeling uneasy and you're unsure what your role is right at this time because you're delegating. So the last time we actually uncovered something powerful. We talk about the fact that you are not overwhelmed, you're over-responsible, and you have started releasing. I'm talking to that leader who took the information and you start releasing. And the question is showing up. Who am I if I'm not carrying everything? I want you to just be still a little. You have become that leader who finally delegates, but you actually feel uneasy and unsure what your role is. So I want you to get a little more familiar with that. And I'm asking you, I'm speaking to you directly. This is the question I want you to think about and want you to answer. If you stopped carrying everything, what would feel unfamiliar about your leadership? If you stop carrying everything, what would feel familiar about your unfeel familiar, sorry, about your leadership? Then we want to talk about that, the ownership trap. I asked you the question, is your identity rooted in being needed or in leading effectively? Because moving from a doer to a leader requires not just a behavioral shift, but an identity shift. And I say, we have learned the art of doing, really learned the art of doing. We have learned the art of serving, but we don't have the art on how to lead. So many leaders are rewarded for doing, and we know the rewards. You get the accolades, you get the praise, the affirmations, you get more responsibility. You're rewarded for doing. You meet your deadlines and your quarter one numbers are met, but your soul is really in the red. So leadership requires that you become. And so an identity evolves. Again, I say where your identity is rooted determines how you lead. So I want to look at an example of an executive leader that is known for fixing everything, but you struggle when stepping back. You really struggle when stepping back. So I want to ask you, is your identity rooted in being needed or in leading effectively? That is a question I would love if you could answer. So there's a discomfort that comes in letting go. That is a fact. We will not overlook that fact. There's a discomfort that comes in letting go. The question is, why does it feel so hard as a leader when you're letting go? We want to look at discomfort as growth, letting go of always. So you want to, growth is hard, it's very uncomfortable, but it builds capacity. It's very necessary. So it feels so hard because there's a loss of control, because you saw yourself as an owner and not as a steward. And there's also the fear of being irrelevant, no longer important. And for example, an example of this is a principal who feels disconnected when not involved in every decision. So you're not, you don't lose control because persons tell you what the decision is. They give you the minutes of the meeting. They give you a report. But you feel disconnected because your hand is not on everything. And you're not the person that is in charge. And so there is silence where there used to be some urgency. There is now silence. And so I ask you this hard question, this important question. What part of you feels threatened when you're not needed as much? What's that part of you that feels threatened when you're not needed as much? And then so we move on to the fact that you need to redefine your leadership. When you're able to answer that question, you must refine your leadership. You are not the source. You need to remember that. As we said last week, you are not meant to be everything. Leadership is stewardship, not control. And as a faith-based leader, because you know that's the person I appeal to, God is the source. You are just the vessel. Your assignment and your responsibility. You just makes you the vessel. So as a leader, you have to start trusting in your outcomes that don't depend solely on you. So I ask a question. For those who think you're the source, you are delegating, you're gradually letting go. It's hard, very hard. You're grappling with not being in charge of everything, not micromanaging, not having everything run directly by you on every single decision. You are now trusting your head of department. You're sharing your authority. You're sharing trust. You're sharing leadership. You are building and creating stewards. And you're allowing people to test themselves to see what they believe, what they can produce. You're allowing persons to earn your place as stewards. You're giving them authority over resources. You're pushing that indirect motivation. Because persons become accountable for your vision. They become accountable for the outcome. They take responsibility. They realize and understand where they fit in the bigger whole. And as the pieces come together, you begin to realize that you built a system of capacity that can in fact withstand your silence, which is what you want to do as a leader. So you can leave your organization much better than when you got there. So I ask you this question: where have you been acting like a source instead of the steward? And for that, I want you to understand what stewards actually do. Stewards are leaders who understand their purpose, who are pressing into their purpose, and who are living their purpose. Consciously and unconsciously building a legacy. So you are able to set your vision, and allow persons to buy into your vision. So there is trust, there is respect, there is accountability, there is flexibility, there is adaptability, there is compassion, there is resilience, there is agility. You're all of those things all put together into a transformational leader. That vision is the driver. And persons are taught, supported, and enabled and empowered to integrate their values at the point of trust, the point of being valuable, the point of being an expert, the point of being delegated, the point of being trustworthy. They have a proven track record. So you want to set that vision in the hands, the sacred hands of these persons who have been internally prepared to show up externally. And so you build people because they continue to grow, let go of old ways. They learn new ways, they adapt, they become innovative, they become creative, and they add that creativity and innovation to a community of practice. Practice built on excellence, systems of accountability and support. And this creates clarity. And so leadership stewards empowers people or a team to make the decisions without constant approval. So I want to ask, because great leaders don't really do more, they develop more. They develop teams, they develop systems, they develop their legacy. They build it out into what is called a community of practice that makes them leave an organization better than when they got there. So are you creating dependency or developing leaders? Is a question I want you to ponder as you look at how you really pull your leadership identity together. What do I mean by that? Who do you become? So if we're to talk about that, you want to look at peace not being the absence of responsibility, but because you're aligned. So it is really alignment. Peace comes from alignment. So you're able to spend time thinking, becoming self-aware, becoming reflective, mentoring, knowing what you have mastered and what you're trying and still learning, and guiding people accordingly into their own selves and what they are good at what they love to do and where they are needed, so that motivation becomes internally driven and not a reward that comes from benefits and spoils, that makes persons competitive instead of collaborative. So this is what you become. Become very calm instead of reactive, very sure. Instead of struggling, you become strategic instead of overloaded. And you become present to objectively listen, actively listen to what is said and not said. You observe what you may have missed later. You are able to step into the informal structure and smoothly transition to see what is really holding your organization together on the ground, and not the formal structure of rules and visions and action plans and quarterly outlays and outcomes and the benchmarks that you want to meet or the ones you have set. So you operate from that place of immersion, no, objective immersion, instead of being a passive observer. So you spot disgruntlement, you spot discontent, and you spot disconnect, and you become strategic, not overwhelmed, not over responsible. You're not in a state of panic or busyness that is not progress. You're not stuck in thinking that performance is momentum. You're not at that level. You're very calm because there is a clarity that comes from understanding how the systems and what the gaps are and what really is the strength of your system. And you build on it through support and mutual engagement and a community of practice that becomes very resilient because you have the time to actually impact it in a very meaningful way. And so I ask you the question, who would you be if you lead from trust instead of pressure? And I just hope everybody's hearing. Just hope everybody's hearing. Dr. Leslie, please indicate, or Frank or Simone, if everybody's hearing. So the question or the next step that you want to take is that you want to start your evolving. How do you start leading differently? What are the practical shifts that you must make? So you want to pause before stepping in, and you want to really ask questions instead of solving, and you want to delegate with trust. So instead of fixing the problem, instead of feeling accountable for every single outcome, instead of thinking that it can't be done right, if you do not do it, you make that pause and you ask a question to this group member, this team member, what do you think the next step is? So you build their capacity and you give them an opportunity to test themselves to see what they can produce. So I ask you the question, where can you pause now instead of immediately taking over? Who have you given or shared that trust, that responsibility, that leadership with? Happy Tuesday. Tani, can you hear me? I'd love if you were able to tell me. William, thank you for joining. So much for taking the time. I hope you can hear me. I'm not feeling well, but moving on. And I just ask you guys to just type your comments and your suggestions in the chat. So asking is so important. You ask persons, what do you think next? What would you do? How would you do it? So how do you develop self as a leader, and how do you develop others? It's really by the questions that you ask your team members, how you build their capacity, their resilience, how you welcome their innovation and creativity and thinking outside the box, how you adapt as a leader. What do you become? How do you lead differently? Those are the important questions. And what would you do if you were in the position? How do you know that what you're doing is the best solution at this time? Why do you think that? And so leaders begin to feel valued, middle managers begin to feel valued, team members begin to feel valued and appreciated for their expertise, for their commitment, for their creativity. They feel more open to join heads and to join their hands and to build capacity through volunteering their expertise, become more committed to the success, to the benchmarks, to the outcomes, have that buy-in that comes from feeling appreciated and respected, have that momentum from feeling appreciated and important to the success and the productivity of the organization. And that vulnerability of this leader makes them pull to the compassionate and human side, where they are now able to unconditionally support that leader who supports them, who values them, who trusts them, who respects them. The well-being, the overall well-being of this organization is developed through its people because they individually feel safe, feel valued, feel appreciated, feel trusted. They know that they are. And so they take personal accountability for the part that they play. They take it very seriously. And they are very loyal in a humble way based on how they know and understand their purpose, how their values are integrated to make them become stewards themselves, carriers of a vision, perfecters of a mission. And thank you for your point, Stanique. John Maxwell says, I never promote a leader unless or until they have replaced themselves. Powerful point. So we must build others, as I said before. And that means that you don't hoard information. You don't feel that you're the only one that can do it for it to do right. As last week, as we said in our presentation last week, you don't actually do over a presentation of your team members so that they represent exactly how you would say it or do it. We don't do that. We don't hoard information. We don't micromanage. We don't seek to become for others to mirror our thoughts as leaders. But you want persons to share and build up those whom they lead. You want them to move along. Thank you so much, Tenny. When team members feel valued and appreciated, they stay more engaged and stay aligned to vision. That is the reason why leaders, good and great leaders, are stewards. They understand that when they leave tomorrow, they must leave the organization better than when they came. They understand that there is not their abiding place. It is a mission field. And they must do the best that they can in all the ways they can to all the people they can as often as they can. Thank you for joining, Curtis. So important. So important. So I want you to look at this question because it's very important when you begin to delegate, when you begin to build that system of a community of practice, when you begin to give people the opportunity to swim in the water instead of on land, when you make your members feel valued and appreciated, when you engage them so there is little or no disgruntlement, when you openly show persons or allow persons to test themselves to see what they can produce, then you are leading differently. You're graduating from ownership, that ownership trap. You're pulling away to becoming a steward. And as I say, becoming more engaged. So I asked the question, which is so important, where can you pause instead of immediately taking over? Because as I said, as leaders, we are very much taught that we must serve, we master doing instead of becoming. We looked at the fact that it is, when you lead differently, it's not just a behavioral, when you lead differently, it's not just a behavioral tactic, it is a identity shift. You have to make that shift in your identity. And so we want to understand that it is more than a mindset shift. It is also a system shift. You build those systems that make sense and survive your silence long after you're gone. It becomes a part of your legacy. It becomes a part of the difference you have made and are making. It becomes a reference point. And that's very, very important, because you want to understand that this gradual shift from becoming from an owner to a steward requires trust over control. And so sometimes there's this leadership tension of how to trust your team, them to make mistakes, and supporting them when they make a mistake. Because the fact of the matter is, control feels safe, especially in the corporate and executive organizations, especially in the educational landscape of leadership. Trust, control feels safe. Being able to control the outcomes, being able to have a tight hand on the deadlines, on your budget, on your team's performance, on the action plan, and also looking at your improvement plan, the targets that are out there, the accountability matrix, the quarterly outlays and outlays, getting to that point, being able to always be ahead and having a hold on that is very important for leaders. It makes you feel safe, but it also keep you in bed at night. It keeps you having meetings over and over and over that record minutes but goes nowhere, because the interpretation, the clarity, the understanding is not there. There is misalignment, there is disgruntlement, because persons have become reporters instead of becoming stewards, and they have feel the pressure to be reporting. They drill into their team members to get them to meet deadlines instead of focusing on the capacity that builds trust, that currency of trust, of well-being, that creates growth. And so you have to choose. If you want to feel safe, you want you and your team members to be growing, you must choose. So the question I want you to ask yourself, so that you're able to make that choice and you're able to build trust rather than control. You're able to persuade rather than force. You're able to reward expertise and loyalty, as we touched last week. You are able to produce stewards. The question you want to answer is, do your team members, those under your care, under your leadership, do they feel safe? Do stakeholders feel that it is worth giving of their time, their energy, their minds, their build up, their capacity, their expertise? Is it worth late nights? Is it worth the collaboration? The question I want you to ask is, do you trust your team or just your ability to step in? Because you were given leadership, you became a leader because you were capable. You made promises on how the quarterly indicators would be met. You volunteered the many ways in which you would ensure that productivity is guaranteed. You, as a leader, met your deadlines. You stood out from the pack. You were rewarded. You know a lot. You're accepted as the leader that everybody will follow. But how do you build leaders? How do you create leaders? How do you build capacity? What is the transition point? Do you build leaders to evolve in the organization through a sturdy and robust succession planning? Or do you hoard the information that when you leave, persons have to start over? Because if you hoard the information that when you leave, persons have to start over, or they have to bring expertise from outside, as strong as a strong survivor who has to know, learn your culture, has the expertise, but has to learn the culture, has to change your culture, have to gradually build it out to be better. If that is the case, then you're in your ownership trap. Because stewards have a vision and have an understanding that I am here for a time. I have an assignment, and this is the limitations of my assignment that is really established divinely. And I am here to really plant. I am not the one that has been appointed, divinely appointed to water. I am not the one that has been divinely appointed to reap. And so I have the system that talks about how do you know the position, your assignment as a reaper, as a waterer, or as a planter. I want to look at that sometime much later, so persons understand the season that you're in as a leader. That's very important. So, do you trust your team or just your ability to step in? So, it talks about watching the Campbell Soup leadership story. I see that. Tenny, thanks for this contribution. A few days ago, and it shows how the CEO took the company from deficit to profit. Very good. But he led differently, and we have to lead differently. We have to become, we have to pass that level, as I said, of doing and become, because we have been trained how to do and not how to really lead, how to steward. We have all been pushed through theory and the revelation of leadership as we hit the ground in our different capacity, whether you're transformational, transactional, whether you are compassionate, whether you're agile, whether you're flexible, whether you're a resilient leader, whatever is the space that you have to occupy at any given time. You want to understand what it means to make that identity shift where you don't just see yourself as being needed. You don't just see yourself as being in control. You don't just see yourself as a final accountable officer. You don't just look at authority as the buck stops here. You look at the complex and comprehensive nature of leadership, of understanding people, of supporting, of mentoring, of guiding, of disengaging, of setting those boundaries so that you hold people accountable, of building the systems where persons become loyal as experts who are defending their vision which is the smaller vision that encompasses the bigger vision. So they understand the role that they play and why their role is so important to the final outcome, to build out the brand, to sustain excellence, productivity, to stand out. And so the entire shift that is important is not just, as I said, a mindset or a behavioral shift. It's an identity and system shift. And that is what allowed him to take the entire organization to make the shift. Because everybody understand the value, their place, what they own, and what is it that they must reward. And together they work to make that change happen. And the outcome is building a legacy that makes him outlives him, because he or she actually leaves the organization much better than they found it. So we move to the next point, the next step, the next transition, when you feel the pull to carry more. Because sometimes the reset moment becomes gradual. You start, there is a little dip, because there might be a crisis, because there might be some tension and some conflict that you have to build out. And you are tempted to take back ownership. If that happens, you want to embrace your reset moment. You want to pinpoint the urge. You want to put your finger on this urge, and you want to pause and realign with your purpose and the vision as a steward, and how you carry this mission, and why you're carrying the mission, how you're fulfilling it, how you are actually living that purpose, who you're pulling along with you, and what is their motivation point or language. So you don't step back into overwhelm, burnout, and over responsibility, that you remain at peace, that calm is established instead of the pressure, that there is no overload. That's just capacity. You want to realign with the purpose of building out your team, of building out your system. You want to realign with the why your silence becomes important, why you have delegated, because you have done it right. You have not missed delegated. You have put all the variables in place, the motivation, the expertise, the desire. And you have balanced that loyalty with the mission drivers, those who want to take that place, those who are equipped to take that place, and those who want, or naturally, or through mentorship or guidance or support, understand their place as stewards, and actually can convert those who feel that they are owners to understand what is it that you own and what you're actually stewarding. So we established last week that you own your expertise, you own the years that you have put into practice, you own your brand, you own your values, but you need to understand that you carry those into a bigger space that we are pulling into a community of practice. So the question I want to ask when you feel the pull to overcarry and to step back into that ownership trap, you want to ask the question, what triggers you to step back into over responsibility? What is it that is pulling you back? What is the driver there? The hindrance. And some cases, you want to look carefully, because awareness is the first step to transformation. So before stepping into an ownership trap, you want to take that breath, and you want to reassess, and you want to reposition your mind, your identity, and your system, so it carries you and your organization is, the systems are able to outlive your silence if you take a vacation, if you take a break, instead of forcing you from burnout or collapse to step away, hoarding information. So the organization benefits when you actually understand that as a leader, this is what's next. Peace is what is next. Accountability, liberal accountability is what is next. Support, building out the gaps, because you're now able to observe you intelligently and objectively. You're now able to test persons and allow them to test themselves to see what they can produce. You are building persons to become masters of their own destiny, and you are supporting and guiding the persons to fill gaps, to recognize gaps, to evaluate progress, and to know the difference between progress and performance, and not to be steeped into the moment or the momentum, but to actually look at capacity building, progress through small steps, and through those small things that become great and big things. That's so important. And so that is where we are. So you want to ask yourself the question. You want to ask yourself that question. What triggers you back into over responsibility? And so this takes us to the new ways of leading. The key takeaways are you don't have to carry everything. And when you let go of everything and focus on the things that truly matter, focus on mentoring, guiding, and leading, focus on stewarding the mission, you do not become the source, you become the steward. You become the vessel or the vehicle through which the purpose is fulfilled. Your purpose, the organization of purpose, the individual purpose. Because you becoming that vehicle or that vessel means that you understand your vulnerable place. You understand what is the lasting effect that you have, leaving the organization better than you saw it. You understand that you are actually, through your systems, building out a legacy. You understand that it's not all about you, but it includes and involves you. And you understand as a steward that you're called to lead differently, to impact lives, to change lives, and make people become masters of their own destiny. So the question I ask is, when you stop carrying everything, the point I'm making, is that when you stop carrying everything, you don't lose your leadership, you discover it. I want to make that point again as I'm winding down. When you stop carrying everything, you don't lose your leadership, you discover it. And so the answer is very clear. That when you stop carrying everything, you lead intentionally. You come back to yourself. You reconnect with purpose and priorities. You ground yourself before leading others. And you create that space, important space to think. You design sustainable leadership. You build systems, not dependency. You empower decision making at all levels. And you normalize trust and shared ownership. And so this integration has to start small, because as I said, sometimes you can regress when you do that, regress into your ownership trap. You want to pause, you want to reassess, you want to reconnect with your purpose. One other thing that you need to do as you bring stewardship into your leadership is that you want to practice daily awareness and you want to also model it for your team. That makes you lead with light and joy and purpose because you now recognize that you don't have to carry everything. Leadership feels lighter, and you are understand that your role is to create conditions for others to strive. So I say the most powerful leaders are not the ones who carry the most, but those who unlock the most in others. All right. So if this resonated with you, you can apply for a face-based leadership reset where you receive emotional clarity, a strategic map that you build out yourself based on your individual needs and your organization and your 7-day action plan. I normally take 10 persons. It's limited and it happens once a month. So you can actually DM me for the details. In addition, you can grab a copy of My Faith Looks Up to start the process, to start the mindset shift and the systems shift and your behavioral shift. And you want to DM me for the details so you get your free audit and book your free empowerment session. So you can join the program. You can also become a part of, subscribe to my Christian Leadership Essentials newsletter that is on Substack and also on LinkedIn. Once again, I want to thank all of you for joining. Tanique, Simone, Frank, Curtis, Leslie. I want to thank William. I hope I haven't missed anyone. Those who are watching on YouTube and those who will watch the replay. I want to thank you. Feel free to place your comments, to add to the conversation, to ask any question you want, and I'll be able to answer in the chat and at that level. I want you to have a blessed and purposeful Self-Care Tuesday. And remember, you're not just a leader, you're a divine vessel with a sacred assignment. God doesn't want you to serve from empty, from exhaustion. He doesn't want you to pray survival prayers. He wants you to lead from overflow. Have a great afternoon, everyone. And thank you for taking the time. God bless you.